From NBC News, this is Today.
For a child.
This morning on Today's Family, stories of parents who turned anguish into action. What would you do if your son or daughter had a devastating, potentially fatal disease that little was being done about? Well, the McCurdy family turned their helplessness into hope.
It's frustrating. We saw doctors from Boston to Baltimore and in every major hospital in between, and they all basically said the same thing. He has weak muscles. We don't know why.
It started as a mystery illness for the McCurdy family. Something was wrong with their infant son, Will. The diagnosis eluded doctors.
We were sort of sent on our way, being told we were lucky that it was something that seemed to be getting better, not worse.
But it did get worse. By the time he was a toddler, Will's heart failed. His white blood cells abnormal. His immune system weak. The McCurdys found a name for the rare disorder. One large family in the Netherlands riddled with the illness called Barth syndrome. It affects mostly boys.
For 11 years, we knew no other person with Barth syndrome. We didn't know any other doctor who was treating a patient. We were completely alone.
Then the McCurdys made a discovery that changed their lives.
One of Will's life goals was to meet another child with Barth syndrome, and suddenly that seemed a reality, which was just a monumental thing.
Through the internet, the McCurdys found 3 mothers who were planning the first ever summit for families affected by Barth's.
Walking into a room filled with other families that you've never met before, and you know that you have a lot in common with these people, you feel an immediate affinity.
The McCurdys decided to keep the momentum going, forming a foundation to pool resources, do research, and to help move the science forward.
The value of all the knowledge that's held by each individual isn't worth anywhere near as much as when you put all that information together.
9 years and nearly $1.5 million in research grants later, their foundation is raising awareness about the underdiagnosed disorder and striving to improve the lives of boys like Will.
Every parent who deals with a rare disease can make this kind of difference. We didn't know how to do it either, but you put one foot in front of the next with your child's best interests in mind, and you can move mountains.
Run all the way back, really fast.
There are other families who've been forced to take a similar path. Susan Axelrod is the wife of senior White House advisor David Axelrod and was profiled in Sunday's Parade magazine. Since their daughter Lauren was an infant, she suffered violent seizures. There were times when they thought these seizures could actually take her life. Well, Susan's mission was to save Lauren and to try to find a cure for the epilepsy. Well, she's helped create a research foundation and with help discovered a drug that worked for her child. For the past 9 years, Lauren's seizures have been under control. Susan Axelrod's foundation is cureepilepsy.org, and Steve and Kate McCurdy's group is the Barth Syndrome Foundation. Good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
First of all, Susan, epilepsy is not a new disease, so how frustrating was this, and what was wrong with the information that was already out there?
Well, you're right. It's a very, very old disease. I mean, it's been known since biblical times, and millions of people are affected, 50 million worldwide. When Lauren was diagnosed as an infant, I thought, well, this is pretty benign and treatable. And it wasn't at the time, and I thought she would outgrow it, and that didn't happen. And so 18 years of her brain being ravaged by uncontrolled seizures, when I felt very alone. But when I found out that this was really affecting millions of people, and that people seem to be just accepting the status quo, I thought, this can't go on. There was nobody addressing this disease with the urgency that it required, watching the devastation that
Were you surprised at that?
Totally, totally. I mean, it just made no sense. And we really, we looked all over to the federal government and to other agencies, and there was just no emphasis on how devastating this disease was and how little was being done to address a cure.
Well, let me move on to you, Steve and Kate. With your son, Will, whereas for Susan, her daughter is part of a large group. For a long time, you thought Will was the only kid with this disease. That must have been really, really difficult for
Well,
you.
it makes you feel extremely alone, and I think the same thing is felt by most of the families who are part of the Barth Syndrome Foundation today. The good news is that with the creation of the foundation, and we continue to work to increase awareness so that, frankly, kids can be diagnosed accurately from the very beginning, Now, we have so many more things we need to do, but many of the families who are just joining us say they don't understand the concept of being alone because they have us.
Do you have any idea how many kids there are that are affected by Barth syndrome?
Well, associated with our organization, we know there are about 120 families worldwide, but we also know that this disorder is very underdiagnosed. The diagnosis is a little bit complicated because it's so systemic. It affects so many parts of the body. So often we find that just a piece is diagnosed. So we encourage any family who has, particularly a son, with either undiagnosed heart muscle problems or skeletal muscle problems, or something called neutropenia, which is a disorder in which a piece of the white blood cells vanishes for a while. If anyone has any of those symptoms without any other explanation, we encourage them to get the genetic test for Barth syndrome.
For people who are watching whose children are affected by some sort of disease and they're having trouble, through traditional medicine and traditional organizations, Susan, what do you say to them? I mean, you're somebody who was pretty well connected. I mean, you were at a point, you were going to school, you have other kids, you've got a powerful husband, you yourself are very well connected, and yet you had trouble starting this off. For folks like Steve and Kate, how difficult is it to start something off like this from the ground up?
Oh, it's really hard, but I think that it comes from our passion. I think you would agree that that you just would do anything for your child. And the coming together of parents is so, it feels so constructive and it feels so powerful.
That's the first step?
I think any doctor will tell you that there's nothing as powerful as a parent with a sick child who's determined to find a solution. The key for us is to make sure that you build a partnership with the doctors and make sure you build a partnership with the scientists. But first you've got to find a way to bring them all together, because in our case in particular, this is a rare disorder, and if you find one new family might have the key to the solution, to the scientific solution. So it's important for us to bring all the families together and make them part of the foundation.
Well, thanks. It's great information, and thanks so much for what you guys have done. It's really important. Susan Axelrod, Steve and Kate McCurdy, and thanks for sharing your stories. And for more information on these foundations, you can check out our website at todayshow.com.